Thank you. Good evening. Yeah, I want to talk with you about change, but in a different way than you normally would do, because we all know the books about change. I'll get back to that in a second. What I want to share with you is some painful personal experiences that made me really understand change and connecting to the people in the rest of the organization. And once you're in boardrooms or whatever name you give to it, it's kind of hard to still understand what's going on there, and it's even more difficult to make a change happen that's needed. So if you read a book about change, right, it always starts with you make an analysis, externally, internally, then you put a dot on the horizon, then you create some excitement around it by mentioning a burning platform and a compelling perspective. You make sure you stakeholder management, put KPIs in place and all that kind of, you got it, right? So, and it's all true, but it forgets about something which is maybe the most vital one, and that is, what is your right as a leader to provoke that kind of a change in the organization in the first place? Why would you have the position to do that in the first place? And that's something those books and those college and all those universities they pass it without realizing how important that is. And I'll give you, as I said, a few stories. The mechanism I've learned over the years is what I like to call read, touch, move. So it's about reading the people that you work with, like I have to read you right now. It's about touching them in one way, and then how do you move them? So let me tell you something about read. So my first job, believe it or not, was in hair cosmetics at a company called L'Oreal. All the jokes have been made, I can assure you. So I was working for a company named L'Oreal, and I was starting as a sales rep, selling shampoo to hairdressers. And soon, after 7 months, I was appointed as a sales manager, and I started to lead those guys, right? So I had a team of 10 guys. I was 25 years old. They were all around 50. So let's say my dad's age, and I was going to lead them. Most of them had 20, 30 years of experience selling shampoo to hairdressers, and I had an experience of 7 months. So you can imagine I felt very confident, right? So I thought, I'm sharp, I'm smart, I'm ambitious, I'm going to show those guys how it works. Really, I was stupid enough to think that way. So I was joining one of those sales guys on my very first day as a sales manager. We went to a hairdresser and he was doing his sales pitch, right? So he was selling his stuff. And I had all the theory about sales and my own convictions in my head, of course. So I was listening to that story and I thought, man, he makes a mistake. I should memorize that. Second mistake, oh, we're only 5 minutes down the road. Third mistake. And I was doing my best, please pick it up. I was doing my best to memorize them all, to be able to give him the most valuable feedback he would ever get in his life, right? So we went after a 15-minute conversation back in the car, and so I really took my position to give it a good shot. And he asked me, so what did you think? And I said, I have 10 points of feedback, 10 points of critique. 1, and poof, wrong question. 2, you didn't listen to his answer. 3, what did you do wrong there, right? That kind of an approach. And he was getting smaller and smaller. And at the end, he said with a very sad, almost childish voice, was there anything I did do right? And I said, of course, shit, I forgot to give him a compliment. And in the theory, I read that you always have to do that. So I gave him kind of an obvious compliment, but it didn't work anymore, of course. Went back to the office, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. And I thought, but what happens if he forgets one of those valuable points of advice of me? I should write them down. So I made a note, and I put them all on paper, wrote him a letter. That was what you did in those days, 25 years ago. And I sent it to his home address. Next Monday, he was in the office, me as well. So I said, Jos is his name. Hey, Jos, did you receive my letter? He said, yeah, I did. And so did my wife, and so did my 2 sons. Why? He said, I was so shocked. I was so sad. I was so upset about the fact that you send a letter like that, like after that horrible day I had to spend with you. You sent that letter. I received it on a Friday afternoon, just before the weekend started. Are you a human being at all? So that was feedback of him to me. And it took me a few years to understand what I did wrong. I forgot to read the guy. Right? I just went on with the content, which I thought was wisdom, to just plow it on his head and say, okay, this is what good sales looks like, instead of wondering what's on his mind. I could have asked, what are your concerns? Do you like working for us? What do you expect from a day like this from a guy that only has 7 months of sales experience? You have 20. Is there anything we can investigate together? How we can work together? How I can add value to you and vice versa? All those kind of questions to read people. Reading is about being curious, is about trying to listen. I think both other speakers had something about listening as well. So about really tuning in and being interested in what's going on in somebody else's mind. If you don't do that, everything you do after that, I've learned over the years, is just flying over their heads, right? So I should have investigated what was on his mind. And I could have shared my own humanity at that point, which was, man, I'm playing as if I'm very confident, but of course I'm insecure like hell. I know very well that you're the age of my dad. You have much more life experience. You know the market. You know the products. You know how to sell for 20 years. I'm doing this with 7 months of experience. I want to investigate together how we can work together because I have no clue how to do it. That was really what I was thinking, right? Didn't even realize that day. Looking back, it would have been so much more valuable for both of us. The other point is that I couldn't have shared the story here tonight with you, but it would have been so much stronger to investigate, to read what was on his mind. So if you ever have to lead a change, first question, if you talk to an audience or on a one-on-one conversation, read the other party, read the other side of the table. What's going on in their mind? Be genuinely interested in what's going on there. Read. I think I made that point. Touch. So then you have to do something to touch them, right? Because it's very nice to know what's in somebody's mind, but that's not where the change job ends, right? Then still the change needs to happen. So you need to enlighten something in that person, to inspire that person in a certain way by which they think, I feel motivated indeed to step on that journey that this leader wants to take with me. And a very small anecdote as well that touched me at some stage, a pivotal moment in my career. It was 2-3 years later, and I was running against the wall. So my career was going like crazy. It was really going well, but I felt less and less comfortable with the way that I was dealing with people. Because I felt that although they respected me, and they thought I was sharp and smart and everything, they were also a bit intimidated by me or a bit overwhelmed, and they were sometimes even trying to avoid me because I know I can get good stuff of the guy, but it's rather painful. And that started to hurt me because I felt I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be, because I was promoted, because I was showing that behavior in that company, that made you very popular, right? So I was playing that role to the max, but I felt this is not me, this is not the full me, and I won't be satisfied if I keep on doing this. So I was at an event, similar to this, with a few speakers, and there was one guy, kind of a management guru, and he was talking about the kind of stuff I'm talking about, like change and whatever. And I was really inspired by the guy. So in the break, I went up to him and I asked him, so listen, I have a problem. Right? I'm very successful and I don't like myself anymore. What should I do? And he said, okay, I have 1 minute because I have to be back on stage after the break, but let me look at you. And he looked at me and then he took my arm. So he fit my arm and he started to feel my arm. And he said, what I feel is a very strong right arm. You have a very strong right arm. I respect the strength of your right arm. It's quite surprising. And then he said, with a strong right arm, you can do 2 things. And he put his arm on my shoulder. He said, you can push people down, or you can lift people up. But now I have to go back to stage. And off he went. But it touched me. I think you can imagine, it touched me because it was exactly what I needed at that moment. He felt exactly what he needed to do. And the way he brought it was so surprising, so unexpected, in a kind of a metaphor that was almost physical, not almost, it was physical and personal to me that it touched me. So he, of course, was a very gifted guy in that kind of stuff. He felt exactly what I needed on that day. So if you have read people, which he did in a split second, if you are able to touch them by creating a surprise, doing something that they don't expect, often a metaphor works quite well. That's why leaders like to talk about boats and ships and sport teams and everything, because a metaphor touches both sides of the brain. And he did this in a very physical way, which at that time worked very well. So if you have to lead change, and you've read the people that you need to work with, and you know what's on their mind, then you ask yourself the question, how am I going to touch them? What is the story? What is the move? What is the surprise? What is the metaphor I'm going to use to make them touched and almost aspiring to the change that need to be made? Okay, and then, so we've read them, we've touched them. Now the only thing we need to do is to move them. So what are you going to share with our team? It's the same kind of group, so somewhere between 50 and 100 people. And he did a story, and it was rationally impeccable. I really thought, man, he's even smarter than I thought. And it didn't touch me at all. I didn't create any desire in me to move differently than I did before. But he was so right. And I shared this with him. I said, he said, what's going on? What kind of a story is this? You're right, but it doesn't create any change of behavior that you need from the rest of the company. How are you going to change it? And and he was quite open to it. And I said, so if you go to sleep at night nowadays, after you made that mistake, what's on your mind? And he became, of course, I wouldn't say emotional, but he was much more personal suddenly. I said, yeah, well, I think to myself, what the hell happened? And how could I have done this? And what would people think of me? And all my friends, and it has been in the newspaper. And so he found it very, very difficult to share that. But in the end, he did. So he stood in front of the audience and he said, I feel so bad about this. And that changed the entire atmosphere because everyone saw his suffering. And that suffering created a kind of recognition. It touched people. And then he talked about, okay, so what do we need to do differently as a company to prevent this from happening again? It's, by the way, it's not something very spectacular in our business. It happened regularly, but this time it was a long time ago. So everyone was like in shock. So by being much more personal and by touching people with his own personal suffering, he created that surprise and that connection with people that they were touched, and in the end were willing to move and to behave differently in the company the rest of the time. So, my story is quite simple. Read, touch, move. And only then you start with the burning platform, the compelling perspective, the KPIs, the right tool set, stakeholder management, communication plan, etc., etc. It starts with deserving that position by reading people, touching people, and only then you can start to move them. Thank you for listening.